A long time ago in a galaxy far away, a distant planet without a known name was drab and really boring, inhabited only by the elderly stick-in-the-mud dragons. Then one day there was fire, resulting in a planetary shift that gave birth to light and dark, heat and cold, other life, and, most importantly, purpose. In this inevitable shift of this world, Lord Gwyn was a pivotal figure, known as the Lord of Sunlight, that could really chuck a bolt of lightning, not unlike Thor of Norse mythology. He was literally born into battle against these eternal and ancient stone dragons who went unopposed until the Lord's souls were unleashed from the flame, ushering in the Age of Gods. Gwyn, his army of loyal knights, and four whom were very close to him, fought a long and arduous battle at his side, and of those close knights, Hawkeye Goff makes it very clear as to why it was such a hard-won battle.
Dragons shall never be forgotten. We knights fought valiantly, but for every one of them, we lost 70 of our own. Exhilaration, pride, hatred, rage. The dragons teased out our dearest emotions.
Gwyn became the lord over Anor Londo and even erected a trophy room of the drakes and wyverns he had slain in remembrance of what he had fought so hard to rid the world of. Obviously, a mighty lord such as Gwyn must spread his mighty seed in order to name a successor, and as such he has had 3 known children, though the exact number is never specified. Neither is who the mother of these children are. A lot of other stuff theoretically went down, but in the end, Gwyn divided his power up among his children and compatriots before he finally sacrificed himself to preserve the first flame. Yet the kiln remained his prison, because of an undead curse that was brought about by the other theoretical stuff that happened and which we won't get into. Of his 3 known children, his firstborn fought alongside him, slaying dragons, but was later exiled and expunged from the annals of Anor Londo for foolish misdeeds, which is rather non-specific. Secondly, he had Guinevere, the alluring Princess of Sunlight, who became a symbol of bounty and fertility. She left Anor Londo to have many heavenly children with her husband, the Lord of Flame, Flann, but she still appears as an illusion cast by Gwyn's youngest son, Dark Son Gwyndolin, who is the last remaining deity in Anor Londo. This illusion of Guinevere was created by him because of his lack of self-esteem and frailty, and to legitimize the illusion of his sister, he had also had to create the illusion of sunlight. As such, if you reveal his secret by attacking the illusion of Guinevere, night descends,
and thy transgression shall not go unpunished. Thou shalt perish in the twilight of Anor Londo.
And you become victim to the wrath of his knights as a murderer of a deity. Even if it really was just an illusion, everyone, blind to the truth, still believes you murdered Guinevere. As such, you accrue sin, and the blades of the Dark Moon will begin to hunt you down.
How dare you produce a blade upon a deity?
Dark Moon Gwyndolin was raised as a girl, and his affinity to the moon allows him to be versed in the art of illusions. So it's safe to say that all illusions in Anor Londo are as a result of him. Him and his Dark Moon Knights, along with Gwyn's loyal Silver Knights, have protected the lost city of Anor Londo for aeons until one day, in the timeline of the 3rd game, he grew ill, was imprisoned, and fed to Aldrich, the lord for the residents of Irithyll known as Aldrich's Faithful.
The Dark Moon Knights were once led by my elder brother, the Dark Son Gwyndolin, but he was stricken by illness.
Gwyn's firstborn, known as a god of war, is mysterious solely due to being stripped of his deific status and his lack of a name. There are many missing statues from Anor Londo that might have depicted this god of war, but were likely removed due to being expunged. We can assume this god took much after his father as he inherited the powers of sunlight, but had respect only for arms and nothing else, which makes sense as to why he'd leave the sunlight blade on his father's coffin sometime after Gwyn sacrificed himself to preserve the flame. For a long time it was theorized by fans that Solaire of Astora was this cast-out son of Lord Gwyn.
If I didn't know better, I'd think you had feelings for me.
While almost all the details seem to match up with Solaire, he was always meant to be a red herring. As it turns out, Solaire was just a devout follower, not unlike Alfred in Bloodborne, who is also voiced by the same actor, of the Nameless war god, and Solaire is an undead just like you. More evidence comes from the statement that his prowess is a product of his own training, and nothing more, making it very subliminally clear he never harbored power of a lord. He makes mention that he only wishes he could be as grossly incandescent as the sun, who is like a fatherly body.
The sun is a wondrous body, like a magnificent father. If only I could be so grossly incandescent.
Meaning he wishes he could be like a Lord Son of Gwyn, so he quests to find his own son instead. Where was I 5 years ago to stop this theory from getting so out of control? The Altar of Sunlight was erected in the God of War's image, but crumbled in time or was destroyed, but he still watches over his warriors. In that same area, you can find a statue of a mother holding a baby. Could this be the exiled lord as an infant being held by his mother? A big piece of evidence of this lord stripped of his deific status we must take into consideration comes from the statement that today, even his name is not known. Then, in Dark Souls 3, you stumble across a King of Storms, possessing the powers of sunlight called the Nameless King. A king, not a lord, because he lost his lord status. To top it off, his looks, straight down to the hollowing, and attire are very reminiscent of Gwyn. His very armor description states it closely resembles the First Lord, Gwyn, as if he couldn't already tell by looking at it. Now what kind of foolishness could this Nameless King have perpetrated in order to be exiled and expunged by his very father, being his firstborn and heir for the throne at that? Well, what did Gwyn despise more than anything and fought numerous wars against? Dragons and wyverns and drakes, too.
Oh my!
Dragons and wyverns and drakes! Oh my! Whatever you want to call them, he's racist against dragons. It appears the Nameless King has buddied up with dragons in the sort and has taken to protecting them. In fact, it is stated he tamed and fought many wars alongside the storm drake he flies in on. And when the beast falls, he claims his soul. This is a custom inherited from the Age of Gods. He used to fight alongside his father as a hunter of dragons, then sacrificed everything to ally himself with the ancient dragons, likely because he was able to tame one, much like how the Lothric Kingdom were able to tame and use wyverns to protect their castle. This also comes to show that maybe the dragons weren't all bad, as Gwyn and his knights believed, and Gwyn's disowned son proved they could serve a much greater purpose once warmed up to. The Nameless King's relationship with dragons could be why a wyvern seemingly protects the Sunlight Shrine on the bridge in the first game, just as they protect the Archdragon Peak in this game. Seems uncanny they would put such a prolific and memorable dragon so close to the Altar of Sunlight if it wasn't for a very obscure hint. By now, it's apparent that the leadership of the Path of the Dragon Covenant fell on him, though this covenant is not technically available as a mechanic. That would also mean this war god was affiliated with two covenants, one centralized around PvP, the Path of the Dragon, and one centralized around co-op, the Warriors of Sunlight. This may also explain why you receive Sunlight medals for successful invasions, even though it seems to go completely against what the covenant stands for. Now, a question I have is, how was the firstborn of Gwyn stripped of his deific status? Was he stripped of his lord status just by name, through a ritual, or through execution? If it's the latter, that could explain his undead appearance. As a final farewell, this Nameless King left the Sunlight Blade on his father's coffin, and with the arms he uses, he has no use for a buff. Normally, I wouldn't think he was executed by his father because I doubt he would have been as forgiving to leave a parting gift, but at the same time, he had only respect for arms and nothing else, right? So no loss to him. His hollowing and undead appearance still remains a big mystery. Even the location of Archdragon Peak in which he resides is shrouded in mystery. Only in deep meditation can this location be discovered. But judging from the screeching sound you hear when the cutscene fades to black, you can assume a wyvern or drake flies you to the location that's clearly visible in the distance. From what I gather, the Path of the Dragon is an arduous task because in order to ally with the wyverns, you have to put up with their onslaught of deadly attacks. Assuming they're somewhat sentient, they should have some clue that terrorizing and toasting the acolytes is a counterintuitive way of getting society to accept you again. Dragon stereotypes, right? Archdragon Peak is also the only location in the game where both the moon and the sun are visible. There's even a message that says if you wish to follow the Path of the Dragon, don't ring the bell. Then another message that says by ringing the bell, you can never go back. Despite all the foreboding messages, you have to ring the bell to summon the Nameless King. All these measures to ensure they all stay in hiding could explain how he and whatever dragons are left here still thrive. There are statues of the Nameless King found everywhere. There's even one that's crumbled, that's reminiscent of the state of the Altar of Sunlight, almost symbolic of the heinous expunging we're about to do to him all over again. The statues depicting the Nameless King and his obvious influence over the area makes it possible he was trying to create a safe haven for wyverns to repopulate and grow. There is a mountain depicting that of a long-deceased stone dragon. He can't bring them back, but the least he could do is kindle the weaker species. There is even a monument of the last ancient stone dragon from the first game, showing their annals were were somewhat preserved to this day. This isn't to say they were completely invulnerable at Archdragon Peak, as we find Havel the Rock standing over a slayed wyvern. There are constant invasions of what seem like mercenaries trying to put a stop to this dragon worship. Dragon Slayer Ornstein's armor and spear can be found just after the battle with the Nameless King, suggesting he could have possibly died there at one point, though there is no corpse, so I don't know. He was one of Gwyn's 4 loyal knights, but he was also the Nameless King's first knight. It is said he left in search of the Nameless King. The Sacred Oath says it's a tale of the Nameless King, Ornstein, and the Dragon Slayer. This Dragon Slayer you fight, though, is only the armor being brought back to life like a puppet by the pilgrim butterflies that are seen all over the last area of the game. All 3 likely had this unbreakable bond, but did Ornstein seek out the Nameless King to slay or to serve? And wasn't he a boss we killed in the first game? What's more interesting is that Smough's Great Hammer says that Smough was the last knight to remain at his post guarding the ruined Cathedral of Anor Londo, when we unmistakably saw and defeated both Ornstein and Smough there. You remember the grief? If it was just Smough, the fight wouldn't have been so bad. Granted, it does say Ornstein was defending the ruined cathedral and eventually left Smough alone to defend it by himself. It seems like a giant retcon to what we originally witnessed. Was it possible Ornstein was in cahoots with Gwyn's firstborn son during our visit all along? It seems that Miyazaki, the creator of Dark Souls, is purposefully trying to get you to question, what if Ornstein himself was an illusion created by Gwyndolin? Now, if that's the case, then what if the painted world of Ariamis was an illusion created by Gwyndolin to protect Crossbreed Priscilla? She does mention Ariamis created the world, but there's no mention of Ariamis anywhere in the lore. What if Ariamis created the painting and Gwyndolin created the illusion of the world as a safe haven for heretics and abominations like her? A piece of evidence that may prove Gwyndolin more than knew about Priscilla is that when being slowly devoured by Aldrich, that Lord of the Deep dreamt of her and was able to conjure her life hunt scythe in the form of magic. As Aldrich devoured Gwyndolin, he transformed into him and gained his abilities, like Kirby! And in doing so, he just so happened to perceive Priscilla and gain her ability as well? That cannot be a coincidence. The two clearly have to know each other for something like that to be possible. Priscilla is a very mythical and innocent creature, yet described as an abomination, a crossbreed between that of a dragon and some other being. There isn't much information about her other than that, and that she is assumed to be immortal. Seath the Scaleless in the first game was a traitor and aided in the fight against the Eternal Dragons. He was the only dragon that Gwyn liked because of this, and was granted dukedom. In Seath's experiments, he searched relentlessly for the secret to immortality, which, as it turns out, are the dragon skills he will never be able to possess. Priscilla also has no dragon skills, is albino-like in nature, and has been long theorized to be the daughter of Seath, but she has no scales. So why would she be immortal? Perhaps one of her parents was a lord. What if Seath and the mother of Gwyn's children produced this bastard child? I cannot see Gwyn doing it with a dragon, considering his views, unless he got kinky with Seath, in which case I don't want to imagine that. Moving on, you really can't help but notice the similarities between Crossbreed Priscilla and Company Champion Yorshka. They are both albino-like, barefoot, never blink, have pointy ears, and dragon appendages, though one is admittedly cuter than the other. At the same time, it's hard not to point out the differences. Priscilla has dragon-like horns protruding from her brow, whereas Yorshka has pale lavender ones spread around her eyes, as well as these more fuchsia-colored tentacles around her neck. Priscilla has a rounder face and cat or dragon-like eyes. Yorshka is scrawny and fragile. Priscilla has a nicer rack and seems taller. Yorshka has a teeny little nose, while Priscilla's is fat as hell. Even their hair color is slightly different. Did I mention Yorshka is creepy? I mean, she reminds me of a dummy or a doll. Trust me, being this critical of women doesn't win me any points. But wouldn't you think that all this leads to nothing other than the logical conclusion that Priscilla is not Yorshka? Maybe a cousin, a daughter, a sister? The first thing I'm going to show you before I get into anything else is the description for Yorshka's chime. Her brother, Gwyndolin, who is the only former Dark Moon captain, presented her with this along with another gift. Her name. Let me reiterate, her name. Item descriptions never lie. Instead, if they don't want to tell you something outright, they pose a question. In this case, it says yes, indeed, her brother is Gwyndolin, and she states clearly that she is his younger sister. If true, it wouldn't make sense if she is related to Priscilla in any way, unless their nameless mother got it on with a dragon or Seath, again, making Priscilla her older sister. But it's very unlikely she's Priscilla's daughter because Gwyn is undead, presumably impotent, and imprisoned in the Firelink kiln. But you also gotta take into consideration that Gwyndolin gave her name. Appearances aside, what if Priscilla is Yorshka, and she was pulled out of the painted world and given a new identity by Gwyndolin? Look at all the evidence leading up to this. She's in a tower where the painted world of Ariamis was in the first game. In this tower, you find remnants of the painted guardians who protected Priscilla. The rest of the evidence comes from both their dialogues and how similar they sound. Let's start with some of Priscilla's dialogue.
Who art thou? One of us thou art not. If thou hast misstepped into this world, plunge down from the plank and hurry home. If thou seekest I, thine desires shall be requited not.
No one else in Dark Souls talks in Old English like this. Now listen to Yorshka.
As a shade of Father Gwyn and Sister Guinevere, persevere in thy knightly duty, hunting down the gods' would-be foes.
Pretty similar sounding. Priscilla is voiced by Claire Corbett, yet Yorshka is voiced by Martha McIntosh. They brought Claire back in Dark Souls 3 to voice other characters. So if Yorshka is Priscilla, why change the voice actor? There are even more clues that Yorshka is Priscilla from their very dialogue. Yorshka asks you a very odd question, but it could be easily brushed off as some silly naivety, but rather, it's a glaring hint. She asks you how you made it to her tower, and even I have trouble answering that question.
May I pose thee a question? This tower, this prison, stands tall and solitary, the contraption bridging its lower reaches long unmoving. So, by what path didst thou here ascend? Art thou a creature of the air? Or other winged thing?
Obviously, you can't fly, but if you answer that you can, she wonders if you are a dragon or a crow.
Oh my. I imagined it might be so. Then thou art a dragon? Or perhaps a crow?
While trapped in the painted world of Ariamis since her youth, what are the only two flying creatures Priscilla knows about? Dragons, such as the dying one on the bridge, mini crows, and even the crow-human hybrids. Peculiar she would mention those two specific creatures and no others. She could have just said bird, angel, butterfly, demon, insect, or some other flying thing like Superman. Rather, she specifically mentions dragon and crow. Then she marvels in nostalgia for a while.
Well, whatever thou beest, thou'rt wondrous strange, yet strangely familiar, visitor.
No, you're just too nice. The peculiar doll was Priscilla's and is the means to enter her world. It mentions she clutched it tightly, presumably as a child, later to be drawn into the painted world. As such, one can assume she is very naive, unknowing of the world outside the one created for her. Now, if you tell her you cannot fly, she makes another remark that makes you think.
No, of course not. Forgive my prying. Think no more on mine asking. I am ashamed to say I know very little of anything.
She blatantly admits not knowing much of anything. Sounds very much like a person kept in isolation her whole life, doesn't it? Speaking of isolation, in the item descriptions for both Priscilla and Yorshka's soul possessions, the theme of these possessions soothing their loneliness has become a glaring symmetry. They were, or are, very lonely. But appearances are deceiving, aren't they? Much can be speculated about why she would look different. One, Yorshka's appearance could be an illusion cast by Gwyndolin. One thing that got me in the first Dark Souls is the description that Gwyndolin created an illusion of a sister, not his sister. This could very well be a translation issue, but what if he yet again created a sister for the same reasons as before and named her Yorshka? That was number 2. 3, her mother could have had yet another child with presumably Seath around the timeline of the first game, making her Priscilla's younger sister. Either way, my theory on the first game is that Ariamis created a painting that was brought to life by Gwyndolin, possibly with approval from his deific mother to protect or imprison abominations that his father and loyal knights would frown upon. Most of these abominations being the scourge, such as the undead, afflicted undead, dragons, in which are also undead, or crossbreed hybrid people. To name a few, you got the Hollows with bloated and infected heads, crows with human lower bodies, and a dragon-human hybrid that was likely a product of Gwyndolin, Guinevere, and Nameless King's mother, and a dragon. Presumably and most likely Seath, as he was the closest to the deific and royal lord family of Anor Londo. Also, when looking through the Lost City, you'll notice that there are statues of Smough and even Ornstein, but no statue of Gwyndolin. Though that's no surprise because he's antisocial and lives a life of seclusion. Just by going into his chamber to see him, he gives you the death sentence, so it's pretty clear he likes his solitary life. You must also take into account that even after Gwyndolyn's death in the first game, illusions such as the sunlight and Guinevere remain. So it's very possible that in this game, the illusory platform leading to Yorshka and the illusion that may be the very appearance of Yorshka herself also remain. Hell, and if it's true and Gwyndolin can create an illusion of Dragonslayer Ornstein that's fully functional, just like a real entity, then it's possible he created the breathing and talking Yorshka in Priscilla's image too. That could explain why she doesn't know much about this world, but why would he make her less attractive than Priscilla? That's just mean. And why would he give her terrible asthma? Give this hybrid an inhaler or something. You know, I don't know what to believe anymore. Every theory can just be dismissed as Gwyndolin's illusion. Guinevere's breasts? Not lore. Illusions. Smough could even have bigger breasts than her. You don't know. Guinevere could really be Gwyndolin in drag. You don't know that either. Anything can be an illusion. Anything is possible when you have an entity that can create infinite and eternal illusions that exist even long after he dies. So, in summary, it's pretty clear that the Nameless King is indeed that exiled firstborn son of Gwyn for siding with the dragons, and I think everyone unanimously agrees with that theory by now. So to hell with that fan canon regarding Solaire. But it's still pretty speculative if Priscilla is Yorshka. Either way, we do know now through dialogue and item descriptions that she is a bastard and most likely the youngest child of the royal lord family. Maybe Gwyndolin created her in Priscilla's image, retaining her memories. Maybe he changed Priscilla's appearance and name to protect her when the painted world of Ariamis eventually collapsed. But then there's also the possibility their mother tiptoed through the tulips, so to speak, with Seath creating yet another crossbreed, then was abandoned to Gwyndolin's care, to which he named and raised her from youth and taught her everything he knew about the Blades of the Dark Moon and his other half-sister. I guess that would explain why she seems to know her sister so well. I don't know, it's all pretty convoluted. God damn. Thus concludes this video on the bastard children of Lord Gwyn. I hope it was very informative. Please let me know what you think in the comments. I would like to hear your theories. If you found this video entertaining and or enlightening, please subscribe for more Dark Souls lore to come. You can even become a patron if you like my presentation. My current patrons mean a lot to me, and I really cannot thank them enough. They are the reason I'm able to do what I love most. Make videos that entertain and learn you good. Also, take a look at my previous Souls lore videos if you haven't already, as I put a ton of work into them, and I think you'll all find them very enjoyable. I also did a walkthrough review on the first teaser demo of Resident Evil 7 if you're interested in seeing something other than Dark Souls for once. Thanks again, and look forward to my next video on the untended graves in Dark Firelink Shrine. There is a lot of mystery revolving around that area, and I want to clear that up in my next video. So stay tuned and look forward to more entertaining videos.
I would speak to my brother of this, one day. Of the shining new hope that joined our dear company. I speak of thee, of course.